Hello from the SDG studio here at UN headquarters in New York. Welcome to this global policy dialogue on meeting our commitments to the world's women and girls. Today we'll take an in-depth look at the recently released progress on the Sustainable Development Goals, the Gender Snapshot 2024. It's a report by UN DESA, the United Nations Department of Economic and Social Affairs, and UN Women. My name is Shakuntala Santharan, Shax for short. I'll be moderating today's dialogue. Thank you for joining us from your part of the world. We're very glad you can be here. And we'd like to thank the UN Peace and Development Trust Fund for making today's event possible. Over the next 75 minutes, we'll delve into the report's cross-cutting data, which shows the current state of gender equality across all 17 Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs. It highlights prevailing trends, gaps, and recent setbacks on the journey towards achieving gender equality by 2030. We'll find out which areas face the most challenges and which goals have seen some tangible progress. This is a timely conversation coming right after the UN's Summit of the Future, where world leaders agreed to the new Pact for the Future. This pact contains terms relating to gender equality and the empowerment of all women and girls, as well as a commitment to promote, protect, and respect the human rights of all young people. Before we begin, here's some quick housekeeping. If you're watching us on Zoom, multilingual captions are available. Just click on the captioning icon at the bottom of your screen and select the language you'd like. Please help spread what you hear today on social media using the hashtag SDGs. We'd love to hear from you. You'll get a chance to ask our speakers your questions via the online Slido platform. There you can tell us what you want to know and vote up other people's questions. Also share what you think in our audience polls. Just go to slido.com/SDGs or go to slido.com and insert the hashtag SDGs. Let's try Slido right now with a quick poll of you, our audience, with this question. Do you think things are getting better for women and girls in your part of the world? Yes, no, or are things about the same? I'll give you a few minutes to vote and get familiar with Slido. Again, just go to slido.com and use the hashtag SDGs to take part in the poll. While you're voting, let's take a look at this video from UN Women with some of the findings of this year's Gender Snapshot report.
In 2015, world leaders dreamed of a reality where all women and girls have equal rights and opportunity by 2030.
Promise us that you will keep your commitments and invest in our future.
With 6 years to go, can we get there? At the current rate, a girl born today will be 39 before women hold as many seats in parliament as men, 68 before child marriage ends, and 137 before extreme poverty for women and girls is eradicated. At the same time, there is more evidence than ever before that progress is possible. Countries with domestic violence laws have lower rates of intimate partner violence. The digital divide is closing, with nearly 75% of women owning mobile phones in 2023. And there are 5.4 million more girls in school now than there were in 2015. In the face of conflict, crisis, and climate change, we cannot afford to overlook half the world's population. The costs of gender inequality are too high, and the benefits of equality too great to ignore. We're calling on world leaders to commit and invest now, so that all women and girls can fulfill their potential. Gender equality is not just a dream. It can be a reality, but only if we all step up.
Yes, let's step up. We know we're off track, but there has been some progress. We did see some encouraging data in that video. It is not all doom and gloom. And now let's find out what you think. Are things getting better for women and girls in your part of the world? Let's see how you voted. 49% yes, voting yes, that things have gotten better. No, 44%. Thank you for your vote and for taking part. Now that you've tried out the Slido platform and hopefully feel comfortable with it, here's our second poll for you. What do you think is most needed right now to achieve gender equality around the world? Is it cultural shifts, more financial investment, peace, or is it something else? While you're voting, let me introduce our gender snapshot experts who are here in the studio with me. Yoongi Min is Chief of the Sustainable Development Goals Monitoring Section of the Statistics Division at UN DESA, and she's one of the co-leads of the report. Jessamine Encarnacion also contributed to the report. She's the Inter-Regional Advisor on Gender Statistics and Technical Lead of UN Women's Global Gender Data Program, Women Count. Welcome to you both. We are posting the link for the report in the chat box on Zoom and Facebook, so you can check it out. Before we dive into the gender snapshot, let's find out what you, our viewers, think is most needed right now to achieve gender equality around the world. 59% voting for cultural shifts, followed closely by more financial investment, and then peace, and 7% voting for something else. All these factors, of course, are needed. You might ask why we need peace for gender equality. Well, for one, it frees up crucial resources for development versus spending it on war and conflict. Thank you for your votes. Your opinion matters. It is time now to hear from Yoongi and Jessa. Ladies, welcome once again. So we heard in that video, we got a glimpse, a summary of the report. What does this year's gender snapshot show us, Yoongi?
So the gender snapshot highlight maybe I'll just go back a little bit. The gender snapshot is the annual publication that produced by UN DESA and the UN Women. And this is our 6th edition of the report. We started our collaboration since 2019. So we not only looking at SDG 5 on like a gender equality, but we look at gender equality intersect with all 17 goals. It look like highlight the gender equality progress, setbacks, success and failures across all 17 goals. So this report highlights a lot of the progress we have made since the 2015 when we started the SDGs, and also look at where the setbacks and where the acceleration effort are needed, and also provide the proved solutions and interventions that the policymakers and private sectors, individuals can take actions to accelerate gender progress, and also provide advocacy materials and for women's and men's to promote gender equality across the world. So this is basically the most authoritative and gender progress, I think, at the global level. And so we would really promote everyone to start looking at this report, because this is a very short, concise summary of the progress.
So you've been working with UN Women on this report for 6 years now, I understand, right? So what does this year's snapshot show us about where we are on gender equality? So, very briefly, Yoongi.
Yeah, very briefly, maybe just I can elaborate more. The overall message is we have made progress in terms of gender equality in all areas. Just for example, and in terms of women's participations in policy makings. So in 2015, there's a 22% of women in parliament leadership. But in 2024, we have 26.9%. I mean, it's still like 1 in 4, but it is a significant improvement since like 9 years ago. And in terms of child marriages, I want to highlight that currently 1 in 5 girls are married before the age of 18. And I know there's still a lot of women and girls married so young, but this is compared to 1 in 4, 25 years ago, there's a progress. And there's like legal reforms, enforcement we see in many countries. For example, there's a 56 legal enforcement in 126 countries, and that promote women's rights and eliminate discriminations. And we see this progress, but they're too slow. So the key message is we see progress, but the progress is too slow. I think the video showed that it will take 38 years to reach gender parities in Parliament, and 6 and 9 years to end child marriages, 137 years to eliminate poverty for women and girls. So this progress is not acceptable. And so the report also highlighted the key areas that we can invest and then can accelerate the progress. That we identify like 6 key areas. For example, how do you invest in this transformative areas in energy, in agriculture, in a digital transformation, in health and climate change that can help through reduce gender equality to accelerate SDG progress overall.
Thanks, Youngie. We're going to look at solutions shortly. Jessa, what stands out for you in this year's report? Any surprising findings?
Yeah, in terms of surprising findings, I would like to point out two. I think partially it has already been addressed by Youngie, is that one, progress is too slow and we remain to be off track. Like you've mentioned that, a child born today, if we are to maintain the same rate of progress that we are experiencing now, I mean, you will see the same number of women in parliament only after she's already 39 years old. Or when she's 68 years old, that's when child marriage ends. If we retain the same progress, she wouldn't even see extreme poverty eradicated in her lifetime because it will take 137 years. And it's also further threatened by climate change because around 158 million more women and girls can be pushed to extreme poverty by 2050 if we do not address climate change. And then the second sticking point for me is that the cost of not achieving gender equality is just too high for us to ignore. And at the same time, the benefits or the gains of achieving gender equality is also just too high and important for all of us to ignore. So just to illustrate, the annual global cost of failing to adequately educate our younger population is around $10 trillion. That's the GDP of both Japan and France combined. That's more than that. And then second, you mentioned about the digital gender divide. If it remains unaddressed, the cost for low and middle income countries with regards to this digital gender divide, it's around $500 billion in the next 5 years. And then lastly, I think one of the findings in the report is that on a daily basis, 250 million hours are spent by women and girls for water collection. That's more than it. It actually surpasses the total work hours of all individuals just in UK alone. So it's the costs and likewise the gains are simply too high for us to ignore and not act on.
Thank you for highlighting that. So we are off track, right, with all the indicators on Goal 5. None of them have been met, but we did see some promising statistics in that opening video. Youngie, what are some of the bright spots in the data?
Yeah, I think as I mentioned, we see the increasement in women's participation in decision making, although it's slow, but we see the improvement over the years. Slowly, it's much better than 2020, and it's much better than 2015. But there's still much more need to be done to provide the decision making for women and girls. And we see like great increasement in girls' educations. And I think in many, like particular in primary and the lower secondary educations, and in most of the region, we already reach gender parities. And only a few regions are left behind. And when girls in school, they have a better achievement than boys. So they have a higher completion rate and higher grades. So we see this also improvement. And in terms of the legal, I just mentioned that a lot of countries start promote the legal legislation and to eliminate gender discriminations and also violence against women. So one thing, like for example, for country, in the report we find that for country with the legal legislation that prevent domestic violence has much lower intimate partner violence rate. So it's like 9.5% that for country with this legislation compared to 6.1% with for the country without the legislation. So we see a lot of the progress have been made, that if you just have the right policies and interventions in place, that the achievement can be tremendous.
We have to keep it up, step it up, really. Jessa, are there gaps in the data? And if so, how do we improve data collection?
Yes, unfortunately, there are many gaps. Like, despite the advances that we do have in terms of data production, data collection, countries on the average still lack 44% of the needed data to monitor all the gender-specific SDG indicators. And of the 193 countries who committed to the Agenda 2030, no one country has complete data on the gender-specific indicators. So just in how to address that, I wanted to highlight three things. One, improving on and delivering on our commitments. So next year is 2025. It's the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, or what we call Beijing Plus 30. This declaration also calls for and committed to more data so that we can monitor implementation of policies affecting women. So this is an invaluable opportunity for us to assess our progress, to evaluate our policy impacts, and likewise to improve our evidence base. Second, we have to allocate funds. We have to invest. Yes. Right now, we see that countries have attained just over half of their full potential with regards to planning, coordinating, producing, or making gender data accessible. And we need to secure reliable funding for us to reach our full potential. However, when we look at the data in terms of nearly half of the members of the OECD Development Assistance Committee members have either not invested on gender data related activities or minimally invested or almost negligible. To be exact, 0.05% in terms of gender data related statistical activities with regards to statistics. So I think the message is clear. We need to make investments, meaningful and sustainable investments on gender data. And then lastly, we need to innovate and likewise ensure that, inclusivity. So to address gender data gaps, we have to have a meaningful recognition of all sources of data, including citizen data. Together with UN DESA and UN Women and other partners, particularly from civil society, we are pushing the agenda forward with regards to citizen data so that we can have more data to monitor the SDGs, likewise, whether locally, subnationally, etc. But also, we also believe that, it's also in line with the principle of openness, fairness, transparency in the context of statistics as well as public policy.
So this is citizen data basically from the general public, right?
Yes, from citizens and communities. So it's empowering citizens. It's making sure that they are contributing to data development with regards to data for them, data about them, and data by them.
Sounds like a great idea to me.
Yes.
Yongyi, we heard just now what our audience thinks is most needed to advance gender equality. What does the snapshot recommend to eliminate gender disparities across all the goals?
I mean, this is not just an overview of the progress. This report is not an overview of the progress in terms of gender equality. It's a call for actions. And this report is basically, we want you just now read the report. You need to act on it. You need to champion it. So everyone, if you have a copy or just have a look at the video, remember a number. And then when you have a conversation with people, and then you can talk about it. So you champion it. We want policymakers, private sectors, individuals starting to take actions from small steps. And for individuals, for example, I in particular want to champion men to advocacy and take actions on gender equality. I see enough women and to promote gender equality, but I want to invite more men to participate, to advocate and act that. You can start challenging gender stereotype and contribute to household work. And I know in the report we talk about women spend 2 to 5 times more in unpaid work and domestic care work. So I would like the 2 men starting taking care of do some chores at home and take care of the families more. So that's one thing. And for private sectors, then things you can do and promote equal pay and for equal work, and also provide special care for women and during the workforce to for example, like maternity leave and some special care for women, and to give them more of these opportunities. And for policymakers and implement the legislations to protect women and girls. And so I think everyone can take a small step and action and to promote gender equalities in general. So the report has a lot of action points and also prove the solutions. And so where you can looking into the area and work towards promote gender equalities.
So it's not just policymakers who can take action. What's your call to action, DESA?
Yes, we need to do progress on gender equality because it will contribute to progress across all the SDGs. I mean, it is development that benefits all, not just women and girls. We've seen that from the report that, SDG 5 can contribute to SDG 2, for example. Just to give a specific example, is that closing gender gaps in farm productivity and food system wages can raise the women farmers' income as well as global GDP by as much as $1 trillion. And what does it translate to? It actually reduce by 45 million women and girls or population who are facing food insecurity. So it's also contributing to SDG 2 towards zero hunger. So if we have households connected to electricity, we will also see that that women are more likely by 9 to 23 percentage points to gain employment outside of their homes. So I think that the intention there is to integrate gender equality, make sure intentionality, integrate it, and we will see progress across all the SDGs that benefits everyone.
Because it's all connected.
Yeah.
So gender equality is essential then, right, for the achievement of sustainable development in all its dimensions.
Yes.
Yeah, I agree. I just want to add, last year's, in the last year report, we said close gender equality will cost $360 billion. It sounds a lot, but if you hear what Jessa just mentioned, if you close gender gaps in agriculture alone, it can add a GDP to $1 billion. So the return is much higher That's the investment that the government can make on this. And for example, that if you invest in care economy and infrastructures, it can add up to 300 million jobs and by 2030. So this is a small investment we can make, can have a multiplier effect across all SDGs.
With significant returns.
Yes, it is. So lack of gender equality also reflects the lack of progress, overall SDG progress. So we see there's no a single indicator of SDG 5 has been achieved, which is like mirror the lack of progress overall of SDG progress. Only 17% of the SDG target are tracked to be achieved by 2030. So they're not like parallels and reflect the lack of progress, overall progress.
Let's get some questions now from our audience. We've got them up here. We have a question here from Vladimira Kantarova from the Czech Republic. Pardon me if I'm mispronouncing your name. Are there examples of data on women and girls with disabilities that were included in the report? If not, what are the barriers? Ladies, who'd like to take this?
I want to mention that now this report we probably do not, but in the SDG report, annual report this year, will particularly have one fact about women and girls with a disability has a much higher rate of violence against women compared to women in general. We have example from 4 countries in the Asian Pacific, and the report covers that. In terms of the data, I have to admit there's actually not sufficient data to cover this women and girls with a disability. First, as just mentioned, we do not have sufficient data for women and girls, not mention this intersection between this women and the disability. So they face this multi-sectionality of disadvantage. And so there's a more investment for this type of data collections.
Jessa, did you want to add to that?
No, with regards to disability, it's also a data gap that, that is persistent. That more often than not, disability questions are included in censuses, not necessarily on surveys, and therefore, with SDG indicators being monitored coming from around 40 to 50% coming from surveys, that already spells the difference of unavailability of data of persons with disabilities, and that's where I think we're coming from in terms of the third point that I earlier made in terms of other sources of data. Because, for example, if we explore administrative data further, if we explore citizen data further, it can provide more disaggregated statistics, particularly for those furthest left behind, because communities are leading, communities with targeted beneficiaries, with targeted constituents, like whether it's indigenous peoples or whether persons with disabilities that are often excluded in official statistics or not part of the design and household survey, can likewise be monitored and measured.
Included.
Yeah.
So here we have a question from Sophie Mitra here in the US. Have there been studies specifically tracking SDG indicators for older women, age 60 and older?
There's a few studies and tracking SDG indicator, but it's similar issue that due to lack of data. And a lot of survey only covers women in the reproductive age, which is
15 to 49.
And so a lot of the older women has been excluded from the survey. And so we do not have sufficient data for older women, which is a really important issue that we need to address.
And I think that has always also been a persistent issue, particularly for violence against women, because we cannot have an heroic assumption that, that doesn't happen after 49, because the way that, violence against women data are being collected, particularly on a specific subset, for example, the demographic health survey, it covers only 15 to 49 years of age, the reproductive age. And that's where more often than not questions on violence against women are included. And therefore, if we are only using the tool then we don't have information on violence against women that are committed against those that are not even 60s, but even age 50 or over. So
yeah, because there's definitely violence against older women
so
too.
I think two things here. Intentionality is key. We have to design our surveys in such a way that it addresses specific pockets of subpopulations, and then two, there should be a targeted approach. If the intent for data use is really for women 60s and over, the design of our data collection tool should likewise be matched with that. It cannot be like an afterthought that this was the design, this is where we're getting the data, and then can we find it? It will not
pick it up.
Yeah. So it cannot be an afterthought. Intentionality is key.
And now here is another question from Valerie from Make Mothers Matter. Where is the data that shows the impact of maternity, motherhood on women's rights and gender equality?
Yes, for data that show impact of maternity and motherhood and women's rights, I think part of it, it's a lot, but part of it is in SDG 5.4.1. Where we find unpaid care and domestic work. So the motherhood, like the stereotyping that mothers will do the unpaid care and domestic work more often than not in households. And we see that quite often, that globally, the number is women spend 2.5 times more than in terms of hours spent on unpaid care and domestic work than compared to men. And therefore, if they spend a lot of time on unpaid care and domestic work, there's also little time for economic activities, for other paid activities. There's also limited time for leisure activities, for self-care, etc. So that's something that is also evident, particularly in SDG 5.
Yeah.
Did you want to
add? I just want to re-emphasize that if you invest in the care economy and infrastructures, you can add 300 million decent and low carbon jobs, and by 2035.
I'm learning a lot here. So here's a question. I think we have time for at least one more question. Abraham Joseph here in New York. How do you plan to advance gender equality in least developed countries, landlocked developing countries, and SIDS?
Yeah, maybe I'll just start on the least developing country, landlocked developing country, and SIDS and face their special challenges. So there's a couple ways that we can try to advance gender equality. I can start from the governments, and the government need to integrate gender policies and enact the legal framework to protect women's and promote gender equality, and promote women's decision-making. So you need to have women's in decision-making at all levels, in public sector, in private sector, in government decision-making. And so this can be used a different way to achieve that. In Parliament, you can use a quota system, and even the UN, that we want to promote gender equality at all levels of employment. And so this is one thing we can do. So we also try to have gender-sensitive budgeting, so integrate gender responsive budgeting in all government budgeting, and maybe DESA can add a few more.
In terms of advancing gender equality, particularly for these specific groups, one of the things that we are doing at UN Women is for small islands and developing states, and even landlocked countries, to produce more data on gender and environment. That is often something that is, in the SDG goals, a lot of these environment-related goals are gender blind. There are no gender-specific indicators in those gender-specific goals. And then, of course, this also translates to no data on gender and environment. So now we are conducting gender and environment surveys, particularly in the Asia and the Pacific, the one region that experiences the most disasters. And therefore, we learn a lot from the experience of Tonga, of Kiribati, of Mongolia, being a landlocked country. So these are the things that we are able to unlock in terms of the intersection of gender and the nexus of gender and environment with regards to that. So that, once, as you mentioned, it's not one size fits all. It's depending on what specific gender policy is most relevant to these groups of countries.
Ladies, thank you so much. I wish we could keep talking, but we must wrap up. Yongyi, Jessa, thank you for your insights into the Gender Snapshot, for your work to produce this very vital report.
Thank you for having us.
Yes.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, ladies.
Yes, please.
Check out the report. And now we have another poll for you, our audience. This time, we want to find out, if we could bring that up for you, in which part of society do you think gender equality is most needed? Is it at home, at the workplace, in government, in media, or someplace else? And while you are casting your vote, let's watch this video now from UN DESA to find out where we stand overall on the SDGs.
The Sustainable Development Goals Report 2024. A moment of choice and consequence. With just 6 years remaining, current progress falls far short of what is required to meet the SDGs. The report reveals that only 17% of the SDG targets are on track, with nearly half showing minimal or moderate progress, and over 1/3 stalled or regressing. The convergence of multiple global crises has severely hindered progress. The lingering impacts of the COVID-19 pandemic, escalating conflicts, geopolitical tensions, and growing climate chaos have severely hindered progress. We must expand on successes to drive accelerated action. We're seeing significant progress in reducing child mortality, HIV prevention, and access to water, sanitation, and energy. We are at a critical moment of choice and consequence. We need bold action for peace, resolving conflicts through dialogue and diplomacy, financial support, reforming the global financial system to support developing countries, implementation surge, investing in critical areas like food, energy, social protection, digital connectivity, and more. We must empower women and girls in all our efforts. This year's Summit of the Future and upcoming conferences in 2025 are our chance to accelerate progress. We must act now and act boldly to rescue the SDGs. The choices we make today will shape our collective future. United, we can overcome any challenge and realize the world we want.
Yes, we need partnerships and collective effort to do better. The video mentioned the Summit of the Future that just took place and 2 major UN conferences in 2025, the Conference on Financing for Sustainable Development and the World Social Summit. UN DESA will surely hold more global policy dialogues in the lead up to that. So let's find out now, how did you vote in our last poll? In which part of society do you think gender equality is most needed? Coming in tops at the workplace, followed closely by gender equality at home with 32%, and then in government with 21%, and just 3% of you voting for gender equality in the media, and 3% someplace else. Well, we need gender equality in all parts of society. It's important everywhere, and it's going to bring benefits to us all, women, men, young and old. So How do we get there? To talk about solutions and the way forward, I have with me now Fatani Papayati, who is Deputy Director of Policy and Advocacy at the International Center for Research on Women, Alejandra Tentale, who is an Afro-descendant activist from the Tembembe Center of Afro-Mexican Studies. She's also part of the Millennials Movement and the UN Major Group on Children and Youth. And joining us online from Washington, D.C. is Anna Tabitha Bonfort. Anna is an economist with the World Bank's Gender Group. Thank you all for being here.
Thank you so much.
So the gender snapshot shows us that there's much to be done. Fatani, if we could start with you, please. You have many years of experience in research, analysis. You provide strategic guidance to governments, to organizations. So what do we need to get on track with gender equality? What kinds of investments and solutions at the macro level? Because that's what you focus on.
Thank you. I do focus on the macro level, and what we see is that as the gender snapshot, which is a resource I use very frequently in my research, showed us last year in 2023, is that we need an additional $360 billion annually to promote gender equality goals across the world. So I think first and foremost, what we need is financial investment. But at the same time, we do know that low and middle income countries have a harder time mobilizing these resources domestically, particularly due to macro level policies, such as the cost of borrowing is higher for them, debt is soaring in that group of countries, and that makes repayment more difficult and necessitates more resources going into the repayment of debt rather than into investments in social protection services, quality education services, healthcare services, including sexual and reproductive health, which is critical for women and girls and all their diversity. So we do see that these types of investments are increasingly challenging for a large number of countries. So I think the critical priority right now is addressing these macro level challenges that can then free up those resources that can be channeled to policy options and investments that will have a tangible impact on the life of women and girls. At the same time, we have also seen that even when these resources are available, we need two critical components to improve their sensitivity to gender and have a better integration of gender components in these policies.
To make sure the money is channeled right towards empowering women and girls.
So we need feminist women around the table making these decisions. So we need changes to and rethinking our feminist leadership in our global governance. And then we also need a robust, flourishing civil society. There is plenty of research showing how women's rights movements drive change at the local level, and then working closely with policymakers at the national and global level, they can promote that local change to the highest levels of global governance.
Yeah, where women lead, data does show that there is more improvement in many areas. So data helps drive investments and policies, and poor quality gender data presumably means will translate into poor quality policies. So we need more accurate data. We heard Yong-Yi and DESA talking about the need for that. Anna, you are a data expert as well. So how do we get better data, and how do we make sure that the data we do have is used to maximum effect, to inform policy, and doesn't just get overlooked or ignored?
Thank you, Shax. No, I think that's a super relevant question. Heard from DESA, right, how we need more investment in data. And this is exactly what the World Bank is doing. So we are a development bank and we provide a lot of financing for data. So in the last 5 years alone, we provided more than $2 billion of funding to more than 40 of the poorest countries. So this is really building up statistical capacity in some of the low resource context. We also do a lot of research into how we can improve the quality of data. So, and then we make sure that these best practices in data collection are also applied in practice. So together with a few of my colleagues here at the World Bank, I lead the Strengthening Gender Statistics project, where we work with national statistics offices in 12 countries to build capacity in data production and also in data analysis and data dissemination. And what's the impact of all of this, right? I'll give you an example from one of our data visualization workshops that we recently conducted in Cameroon. So one of the participants came over to the team afterwards and said, look, visualization really will help us get across, the point in our data. We are used to producing these large tables and we're used to producing these like incomprehensible statistical abstracts. So now we have an opportunity to really showcase what matters and to bring it into the right hands at the right time to make sure, this data can feed into important decision-making processes. And this is also something that we really prioritize here at the World Bank. We have a gender data portal that gives access to more than 1,000 indicators that are relevant for improving gender equality. And what we allow users to do is, to create their own insights using the data, right? So you don't have to flip through long reports. You can go and, have this data accessible to find information quickly that you need and to make it interactive and exciting to the user. I think this is super important. And often something, where data is regarded as boring or as, not easily accessible. But when you think about it, right, every data point reflects a human story, reflects a human life, right? So this is something we want to make sure, that it really sticks with people. And there are plenty of examples where data has made a difference, right? So there have been countries where the first gender-based violence survey action, right, gave people the evidence that they needed to convince the government that they needed an action plan to combat GBV and to come up with strategies to fight it. So this makes a change in the life and well-being of GBV survivors.
Certainly does. Thank you, Anna. Now, one group about which there is insufficient data is Afro-Mexican women. Alejandra, please tell us, what challenges do Afro-Mexican women in Mexico face, and what are you and your organization doing to help women in your community?
Yes, well, I think the principal problem is the capitalism system in union with the patriarchal system and the racist system that is always a problem in our communities. So to have a better achievements or to do the goal to the SDG 5 in Mexico, for example, is financial. Yeah. Yes. We need money. That is the reality to can do best our work, because we are doing things as a social societies. I think that is the key of the efforts that we need to do. Talk with social societies, what they are doing, what we are working as women, Afro-Mexican women, as Afro-Mexican youths too, because taking in account the thinking, the works, the things that they are doing as a community is really important to really have a better, to achieve the goals. I mean, I think Afro-Mexican women, we live different things that Mexican normal woman lives. For example, the violence in the jail. A lot of Afro-Mexican women or even indigenous women, they don't speak Spanish. And they need to present their case in Spanish. They are in jail. That is not fair, but they are still in jail because they cannot present their cases in Spanish. So how we can do, or how we can go to the next level in these SDGs achievements, if we are not taking in account in something really, really like simple, or maybe some people is something diminutive, but it is not. It's something big, because we cannot go to have a job. We cannot have better opportunities. We are living obstetric violence, the harassment in the streets, lack of opportunities of education, also because of the language. So I think the key here is taking account social society, how they are working their own problems to use the money, because we need the money and we need to use the money in a better way, not just taking in account women, but all the women, like indigenous women, Afro-Mexican women, mixed women, wherever. All the women needs to be taken in account so we can do our work better, and then the SDGs can go to the
can be achieved, right?
To be achieved, yes.
So you're working directly with women. You're also working with youth, aren't you?
Yes.
Young people to boost data access and also activism.
Yes. As Afro-Mexican Center of Studies Tembembe, with the Millennials Movements, we are working also with data to complete the solutions, or to improve better the things that we are doing, because youth Afro-Mexican women have a lot of information. Sometimes people come to us and say, we need to do the research of what we need to do, but we know what we are doing because we know our context. We know what we need in that spaces. And even in Mexico, it's a big country. We have a lot of diversity. So taking in account, again, that is like the emphasis that I'm doing. The context of every woman is important. So the goals can be do better.
Yeah, and you were saying that, you were telling me earlier that activism efforts are paying off, right? That young people want to be involved and that they want to be part of the change.
Yes.
Is that right?
Also, men and women and everybody needs to be in that fight, because we are human beings. We are a human is a social being. So if some part of us we are working in the problems, and the other part is doing nothing, it's like a never-ending cycle.
So that brings me to my next quick question. You're also working with men. You mentioned the patriarchal society. How do Afro-Mexican men, Mexican men in general, view gender equality?
Yes, I think it's like both sides of the globe, because at least in our activism, in our programs or centers, we are taking account the men, and they are conscious of how we need nonviolent masculinities, and we are working with a lot of workshops, programs to let them know that patriarchy is affecting us in every part of our lives, not only women, also men, and how they are taking responsibility of the lack of rights, or how they can slow the things that we are doing. Because sometimes also even in government, we want to make a denounce or whatever, and they say no, because this is not true, they don't believe us, they re-victimize us. So if men take part of these problems, of these activities that we are doing, they can help us to achieve the goals of the SDG 5. So Afro-Mexican men is taking in account that things, at least in the programs that we are applying. We see how they are interested in being part, but also is there some resistance in all the men, I need to say it, they are more like in their minds, women need to be in the kitchen, just in the house, and that is a big problem, not only in Afro-Mexican, like in general. But again, we need to take in account how Afro-Mexican women, indigenous women are living with this, taking in account their own culture.
So, many men, not just Afro-Mexican men, like you said, do see women's role in the kitchen, at home. Fontany, how important is it that men and boys get on board and feel invested in gender equality?
I think it is critical, particularly at this time when we see evidence that points to a divergence between young men becoming very reactionary in their views around equality and non-discrimination, and then young women becoming increasingly more progressive. So I think this is something we need to be looking into in more depth and trying to address this divergence. I do believe that individual men at the local level are more open to exploring how this system, the patriarchy, also affects them in their everyday life and their relations with the women and girls in their lives. I believe that it's the systems of patriarchy that make it harder for men to collectively think how they can stand up and speak out for gender equality. So addressing the systemic issues can be the key to progress here, I think. And I always remember the Secretary General in his town hall a couple of years ago saying, gender inequality is an issue of power, and power is not given by appealing to the better nature. There needs to be systemic efforts to take back power or redistribute it in a more equitable way.
Because you were telling me when we spoke before that it can be really hard actually to change the mindsets of some male decision makers, even when there is compelling data showing that investments in women and girls have good returns.
Yes, exactly. We do know that it is not only the right thing to do, it is a very smart investment that can generate multiple economic benefits, improve food security globally, create more jobs, improve well-being for men, women, girls, and boys alike. But there is this very strong resistance, partially tied to entrenched restrictive social norms, but also tied back to the issue of power and unwillingness to share that power in a more equitable way as we are envisioning gender parity currently, not just as a numerical target, a 50% women, 50% men, but as a system of rethinking our leadership toward a more equitable power sharing.
A lot to be done there. So why should men and boys support gender equality? As you pointed out, there are big benefits from it, and they will benefit from it too. There is World Bank data showing that closing the gender gap in the labor force participation could lead to a 20% increase in GDP per capita. Anna, how urgent is it that we make progress on gender equality?
It's extremely urgent. I mean, I think Martini, that there's like this economic opportunity, right? That can be seized, right? You have to think about of kind of like increasing the pie, right? Instead of saying, you pitch women against men, right? And somehow granting more economic opportunities to women, is taking away opportunities for men. I think that's just flawed thinking. I think, we need to think about how we can really use like our entire population, right, to come up with the most pressing answers to the most pressing challenges that we face these days: climate change, conflict, right, the digital divide that's going on. So I think, if you can convince people, right, that there's an opportunity that everybody will benefit from joint action in these areas, right, and really taking advantage of the talent that we have available. I think that's really the way to go.
Fortini, quickly, what are the costs, the risks of not achieving gender equality? We heard Yongi and Jessa talking about that a little bit earlier.
I think we see it in our everyday lives. We see the feminization of poverty. We see the rise in gender-based violence, food insecurity. It is clear that we need to do something. This needs to be addressed. And I think increasingly, and particularly after the COVID-19 pandemic, we're seeing that in many ways, we're asking women and girls in all their diversity to do more, to work more, to care more. We're creating economies that are built on the shoulders of women and girls. So if we are not addressing this growing scope of work that women need to be taking on, we are creating impacts on their well-being, their personal well-being, but as well the well-being of their families, their communities. So, as we already said, there are multiple benefits that can accrue from redressing these inequalities that we're seeing in our private lives and in our public lives as well.
So we've been talking about the need for more female representation at the decision-making table. Mexico has its first ever female president. Alejandra, tell us quickly, how do you feel about that?
I feel happy and sad. It's a kind of mix of feelings because, of course, it's a really good thing that Mexico has their first female president, Claudia Sheinbaum. But also, I think she don't represent the whole woman. As I said before, a lot of women, indigenous, Afro-Mexican, racialized women, we can even have the opportunity of have a job that could let us the opportunity to break the glass ceiling because of our appearance, because of our color of skin, because of the language. So yes, it is a really big thing, a really important and historically situation because it's the first woman in North America. But at the same time, it reminds us the problems that we are living. So every woman in Mexico and every woman in the world for real have that opportunity to become a president, for example, right?
Thank you for sharing your thoughts with us, Alejandra. Before we get our audience questions, Anna, we know that partnerships are key, right, to moving us forward. How are the World Bank and the UN working together to advance gender equality?
Yeah, so the World Bank and UN agencies, they have a history of working together to tackle the most important development challenges. And our teams work together to exchange knowledge and to collaborate on specific pressing challenges. So we partner at the global level, but also at the regional and at the country level. So just to give some examples, at the global level, there's a lot of technical working groups where experts come together to work on development challenges, including, of course, gender equality. For example, I am part of the interagency expert group on gender statistics, which puts out these guidance notes on how to improve gender statistics and streamline them in national statistics systems. And then at the regional level, the World Bank often works together with UN agencies to implement specific operations with high impact on gender equality. So one example there would be the Sahel Women's Empowerment and Demographic Dividend Project that the World Bank does together with the UN Population Fund and the West African Health Organization. And it's really coming together as partners and in addressing key challenges in the Sahel zone by combining technical expertise, coordination, and also financial support. And then at the country level, we also coordinate very closely and make sure that we pull on the same string. So, for example, DESA, who leads the UN Women Count project, right? She and our team from the World Bank's Gender Statistics Project, whenever we're active in the same country, right, we try to coordinate very closely to make sure that we align our work programs and that we really make the most of available resources. So partnerships are super critical. And they're also one of the big highlights of the World Bank's new gender strategy. So we really need to mobilize across the board, not just the UN system, but, involving NGOs, civil society organizations, academia, and all other interested parties, right, to make this change to help achieve gender equality.
Yeah, we need all hands on deck. And now let's find out what our audience wants to know. If we could pull up our audience questions for you. Here we go. So, Titilayo Ogunbambi in Chicago, here in the US, asks, there are limited resources for research, especially for underserved communities. How can organizations invest in more research? Would you like to answer that, Fatini?
Yes, of course. This is a critical issue, and it goes back to what we discussed earlier around the need for investments. Part of these investments need to be at the local level and supporting meaningful participation of civil society. We do know that amazing work happens at the local level. Very often it is not financially supported. Official development assistance, for example, for women's rights organizations has been hovering around 4% for years, and according to the latest OECD data, dropped in 2020-21. So exploring opportunities to increase these investments and also promote the meaningful participation, which goes beyond just consultations, but is more about regular engagement, exchange of knowledge, and capacity building, can address some of the issues that we see at the local level.
Talking about the local level, here is a question from Rekha Pandey in Hyderabad, India. I feel a lot of discussions happen at the higher level, like here at the UN. How do we create awareness at the bottom level so that no one is left out? Would you like to answer that, Alejandra?
Yes, of course. I think that we need to work together. That is like the key. And we have representation, like as I am here, and I'm really thankful for that. But we need more. We need in every country has that representation that realize that kind of talks like we are doing now. We need to be supported financially, because in that way we can increase these achievements. We can for real do a better work. We need to improve also with youth people, because we have a lot of ideas and working together, generations, all generations, and youth, even childs, they need to be taken count also to improve these problems.
There are solutions. Yeah. So here's a question from Larissa Queiroz in Brazil. What is the best public policy to work on gender equality in local governments? Anna, is that a question you can answer?
I think there's a lot of evidence towards the importance of women in leadership position, right? And I think that includes the political sphere. So of course it would also be important on the local government level, right? So making sure that you have female representatives that can speak on behalf of their constituents, right? And bring in new ideas, I think is really important.
To that, Fatini?
Sure. I think that what gives me hope when we look at the numbers and we are like 130 years, please, is that at every level, from the local to the global, there are people working hard at identifying solutions and implementing these solutions. There is amazing work happening on the care economy at the local level, municipalities taking it upon themselves to provide quality care services, and not just childcare, but all forms of care in their local communities. We saw interventions during the pandemic to support people. So there is amazing work being done, and it goes back to the question on how do we bring that to the global level and how do we channel it back to the local. That interconnection can be supported by a strong civil society.
Thank you, ladies. I believe we have time for one more audience question. If we could pull the audience questions up for you again, here we go. How can the UN enhance gender equality in conflict zones? This question from Suleika Ali Yusuf in Ottawa, Canada. Who would like to take that on? How can we enhance gender equality in conflict zones? As we mentioned, highlighted earlier, peace is a requirement, right, for gender equality, because otherwise valuable resources are being spent on conflict and not on development. Any thoughts, ladies?
Well, I think we need to protect that woman. When you are in a war with thinking you are hungry, you have the principal needs are not being covered, that kind of things pass to like a second thing. Also, as UN, as UN policies, we need to protect that women are not going to be raped, because it's one of the biggest problems in that kind of problematics. So we need to make some urgent policies, it's a lot of bureaucracy to do it. So in my job, mine, to don't take that kind of bureaucracy, just act immediately with the people that is working, because as I said, even in the war, in the conflict zones, there are women that are taking care of that. Even if in the general population is not like a principal need, there are women working on that. Find them. Take also. Like just take the responsibility to say, is happening something in this place, what we are going to do now.
Thank you. Fatani, would you like to add quickly to that?
Very quickly. The UN does have mechanisms to protect women and girls in conflict, to promote their rights where possible, to peacefully resolve conflict, to contribute to peace building, whether that's through policies or financing. Of course, we know that in a conflict, there are multiple actors. The UN is not the only actor able to intervene and promote peace and equality, but I do think that the Women, Peace and Security agenda is a foundational group of Security Council resolutions that promote the need for women's meaningful participation in conflict prevention, in conflict resolution, in peace building. So strengthening that agenda, strengthening the organizations on the ground that are working to protect and promote women's rights in conflict can have some level of meaningful contribution to resolving the issue.
But they can't do it alone.
Of course not, no.
Ladies, there is so much more to talk about, but we must leave it there for now. Thank you all so very much for sharing your work, your experience with us, and for what you're doing to help further gender equality. And thanks to you, our audience, for your participation. I certainly learned a lot today listening to our speakers. I hope you did too. We are taking some steps in the right direction. May we continue to do so more and more so. Let's keep striving together for a gender-equal society. If you want to explore the Gender Snapshot 2024 in more depth, you'll find it at un.org/DESA. If you're on Facebook or Zoom, we are putting the link for the report in the chat box for you once again. You'll also see an exit survey pop up when you leave the Zoom meeting. Please do fill that out. We'd really appreciate your feedback as it helps us plan future events for you. Join us next week for another UN-DESA Global Policy Dialogue on October 17th in commemoration of the International Day for the Eradication of Poverty. Then we'll explore the latest World Social Report, which has a focus on ending poverty. For more information on that event, just visit the UN-DESA website. We'll pop the registration link in the chat box for you as well. And many thanks once again to all our brilliant speakers and to you for tuning in, and to our colleagues at UN-DESA and UN Women for coordinating everything. Have a splendid rest of your day or night, depending on where you are in the world. From me and the rest of the team here in New York, goodbye for now.